What happens when evidence is allowed or excluded in a trial? How can one judge decide what a jury is allowed to hear? Why isn't the decision itself put on trial? And if a judge gets it wrong, what actually happens next? Today's video is about understanding how the UK justice system really works. Why judges hold the powers they do, how those powers are protected, and whether true judicial accountability actually exists.
Welcome to Spoken Injustice, where we put the criminal justice system in the dock. Happy New Year to you all. As we start the new year, we wanted to say a huge thank you to our amazing viewers. Your support keeps this channel alive. This year, we will keep exploring the criminal justice system with the same focus and commitment. Making complex issues understandable, giving a voice to those affected, and reminding everyone that behind every case, there are real human stories. And with that, let's turn our attention to today's video. All through 2025, one question kept coming up. How did Judge Goss decide what evidence stayed in and what was kept out of the Lucy Letby's trial? And why couldn't those decisions be challenged during the case? Today, we examine judicial independence and accountability. Can they really coexist? Where does the system stand now, and could it be improved? We are told that justice is blind. Judges sit above politics, above emotion, above pressure, independent, neutral, untouchable. But when justice fails, when lives are destroyed in courtrooms, we are forced to ask a quieter and more uncomfortable question. Independent from what and accountable to whom? In the United Kingdom, judicial independence is treated as sacred, and for good reason. A judge who fears politicians cannot protect the rule of law. But somewhere along the way, independence hardened into something else: immunity from consequence. This was not always deliberate, it was historical. For centuries, Britain's judiciary was entangled with political power. The Lord Chancellor sat simultaneously as Cabinet Minister, head of the judiciary, and Speaker of the House of Lords. One person, three powers: executive, legislative, and judicial, fused together in a way that would alarm most modern democracies. Judges were appointed quietly through networks of privilege and familiarity. Accountability was assumed, not examined. Errors were treated as unfortunate but inevitable casualties of the system. Then came reform. In 2005, the Constitutional Reform Act promised a new era. A formal separation of powers, a Supreme Court physically removed from Parliament, a Judicial Appointments Commission designed to limit political influence, and more importantly, a statutory duty on ministers to uphold judicial independence. It was a constitutional milestone, but it was also revealing. Because while the Act spoke passionately about protecting judges from interference, it said almost nothing about protecting the public from judicial failure. And history makes one thing painfully clear. Judicial failure is far from hypothetical. Think of cases like the Birmingham Six, the Guildford Four, Sally Clark, Donna Anthony. We have referred to these cases many times, where judges allowed evidence that was unsubstantiated, misleading, or simply wrong to be presented and relied upon in court. But today, we don't have to go back decades to see how this can happen. A more recent and shocking example is the Post Office Horizon scandal. Hundreds of sub-postmasters were prosecuted not because they stole money, but because the court assumed a computer system was infallible. Judges trusted that assumption. As a consequence, evidence went unchallenged, disclosure failures were overlooked.
It's not just what the Post Office knew. The question is, why did the courts routinely fail to recognise that the evidence before the court that was being put forward by the Post Office was incomplete and unreliable? Why did that happen? That's a massively important question that needs to be addressed.
Lives were ruined by judicial certainty, where skepticism was required. Which brings us to the hard truth. As the system stands today, independence and accountability are on the opposite ends of the scale. You can have one, but you can't have both. And in the UK, what we see most clearly is independence, often at the cost of real accountability. In the UK, judges cannot be sued for decisions made in court. They can rarely be removed. And the Judicial Conduct Investigations Office deals with misconduct, not miscarriages of justice. Judicial accountability exists, but it operates in limited, indirect, and carefully constrained ways to protect judicial independence. So let's analyse how a judge can be deemed accountable under current UK laws and procedures, and just as importantly, where those mechanisms stop. First, let's talk about what we might call legal accountability. In the UK, judges are primarily held accountable through mechanisms such as appeals and judicial review. In these cases, higher courts can quash convictions, overturn rulings, declare decisions unlawful or procedurally unfair. But here is the thing. Is that true accountability in the way most of us think about it? Not really. These processes can correct outcomes, but they almost never touch the judge's personal conduct. A judge can be legally wrong, careless in reasoning, or overlook key evidence and face no personal consequences at all. In short, appeals protect the integrity of the law, not the accountability of the judge. Then there is what we might call conduct accountability. The Judicial Conduct Investigations Office, or JCIO, investigates complaints such as bias, bullying, inappropriate remarks, failures to maintain judicial standards, and the possible outcomes include formal warning, reprimand, suspension, removed from office, which is extremely rare. But there are limits. The JCIO cannot investigate legal decisions, and it cannot discipline judges for miscarriages of justice. If a judge makes a grave legal error, the JCIO has no jurisdiction. Next, we have what we might call constitutional accountability. High-level judges, that's High Court and above, can only be removed following an address by both Houses of Parliament. In practice, this has never happened in England and Wales. The only UK example was back in 1830, when Sir Johann Barrington, an Irish High Court Admiralty judge, was removed for corruption. So judges can be removed for serious misconduct or criminal behaviour, but not for being bad judges. And then there is criminal liability. In theory, judges are not above the law, but in practice, this only applies if a judge commits a crime outside their judicial role or acts in bad faith. For example, bribery, perverting the course of justice. Wrongful convictions, however, do not meet this threshold. On top of that, judges enjoy absolute civil immunity for acts done in a judicial capacity. This means wrongly convicted individuals cannot sue judges, even for gross errors. Finally, we have what we might call institutional and reputational accountability in the form of parliamentary and public scrutiny. Parliamentary scrutiny, for example, select committee can examine systemic failings or court administration, but cannot summon or discipline individual judges. And public scrutiny. As we know, judgments are published and academia or media criticism is allowed, but no legal consequences come from criticism alone. Put simply, UK law draws a bright line. Legal error is corrected through appeals, misconduct is punished through discipline. And miscarriages of justice? They fall between the two. No remedy. It is clear, therefore, that the system is intentional. It reflects the principle of judicial independence, designed to prevent judges from ruling defensively or in fear of punishment. It is clear that this framework prioritizes independence over accountability, leaving victims of judicial error with correction, but not real redress. So a judge can shout at a lawyer and face discipline, but a judge whose ruling helps imprison an innocent person, they may face nothing at all. Legal error is not considered ethical failure. But tell that to the wrongly convicted. Tell that to the family left behind. Tell that to those who lost decades to a system that insists it cannot look back. We agree judicial independence is essential. Without it, the law bends to power. But independence without accountability is just as dangerous. A system that cannot admit its own fallibility. The 2005 reforms strengthened independence, protecting judges from interference, but they did nothing to protect the public from error. And so we are left with a question. Is a balance possible? If the law can overturn its mistakes, why can't the system that made those errors answer to the harm they caused. Judges' independence over accountability is often justified on the fact that in the most serious criminal cases, judges don't decide guilt. As we know, that's the jury's role. And when it comes to sentencing, judges are generally required to follow clear guidelines set by law, only departing from them in very specific and exceptional circumstances. From this perspective, the power of the judge can seem limited, structured, almost constrained. But here is the catch. This view seriously underestimates the influence judges wield at critical points in a trial. Think about the preliminary decisions judges make. What evidence can be admitted or excluded? Whether bad character or hearsay evidence is allowed? Applications to dismiss the case or to rule no case to answer. These decisions can shape the entire trial, decide what the jury sees and hears, what arguments can be made, and ultimately whether the prosecution or defense even has a fair chance. In other words, judges may not hand down the final verdict on guilt, but their pre-trial and trial management decisions can shape the outcome, sometimes with life-altering consequences. And yet, accountability for those decisions is almost entirely absent. That's the tension at the heart of the debate. Judges are independent, yes, but that independence can become unchecked power at the moments that matter most. The reality is stark. Judicial independence is robustly protected, while accountability remains narrow, expressed largely through open justice and public scrutiny rather than through any meaningful personal consequences for serious errors of judgment. But should the two coexist? Can they coexist? And if so, how? These are my questions to you. Let me know in the comments below. Because justice is not just about being free from influence. It's also about being responsible for consequences. Judicial independence is not negotiable, but it seems accountability has become optional. As the former Attorney General Lord Goldsmith observed in 2004, judicial independence exists for the benefit of the public, not as a privilege for judges. Although he was speaking in a very different context, that principle resonates powerfully here. Judicial independence was never intended to insulate judges from scrutiny, nor to place their decisions beyond meaningful examination. When accountability is absent or purely symbolic, independence risks drifting from protection into privilege. And it is at that point that public confidence in the justice system begins to erode. A system that protects independence without engaging seriously with responsibility may preserve authority on paper, but it struggles to maintain legitimacy in the eyes of those most affected by its failures. I hope this has helped answer some of your questions and, just as importantly, sparked a meaningful and informed debate. If you have found this discussion useful, please consider subscribing, liking and sharing this video. It genuinely helps us continue our mission to educate, inform and humanize the criminal justice system. And as always, join us again as we sit and rise in this unique trial.